"This man can't open the damn gates. This is madness," shouted the mayor when he heard the old man's suggestion. Tom Wilson, 78, just smiled. They didn't know yet, but Tom's 35 years in submarines had prepared him precisely for moments like this. With the town about to be submerged, this crazy old man was their last hope. Tom Wilson woke up at 5 a.m., just as he had done every morning for the past 60 years. Military habits die hard. At 78, his body moved a bit slower, but his mind remained sharp as ever. From the window of his modest riverside cabin, he could see dark clouds gathering over the mountains. The weather forecast had warned of heavy rainfall, but Tom knew from experience it would be worse than predicted. The small town of Riverdale, nestled in a valley between mountains and the wide Carson River, had always lived with the threat of flooding. The dam built 30 years ago was supposed to protect them, but it had never been truly tested. Today would change that. Tom put on his weathered blue jacket and navy cap. No insignias, nothing to hint at his distinguished career. To the townspeople, he was just old Tom, the quiet man who fixed boat engines down by the marina and occasionally taught sailing to local kids. No one knew he had once commanded the USS Nebraska, one of America's most advanced nuclear submarines, or that he had led some of the most classified deep-sea missions during the Cold War. As rain pounded his metal roof, Tom's radio crackled with an emergency broadcast. All Riverdale residents are advised to prepare for possible evacuation. The dam's control systems are experiencing technical difficulties. Tom frowned. Technical difficulties during a flood warning was exactly the kind of scenario he had trained for, except underwater with 50 crew members' lives in his hands. At the Riverdale Dam Control Center, chaos reigned. Mayor Richard Blake, a 45-year-old former businessman with political aspirations beyond their small town, paced nervously as engineers frantically worked at control panels. "What do you mean you can't open the spillway gates?" Blake demanded, his voice rising with each word. Chief Engineer Sarah Johnson, 38, wiped sweat from her forehead. "The electrical system is completely fried from the lightning strike. The backup hydraulics are responding, but the gates are jammed. Water pressure is building by the minute." "How long do we have?" Blake asked. 3 hours, maybe 4 before the water overtops the dam. If that happens, she didn't need to finish. Everyone knew that an overflow could erode the dam's earthen sections, potentially leading to a catastrophic failure. "Start the evacuation," Blake ordered. "Get everyone to higher ground." Outside, the rain intensified. The sky had turned an ominous shade of dark gray, almost black. As emergency vehicles began moving through town with blaring sirens, Tom Wilson stepped into his old truck and drove toward the dam. At the security checkpoint, a young guard stopped him. "Sorry, sir. Access is restricted. Town emergency." Tom nodded calmly. "I understand. I worked with hydraulic systems in the Navy. I might be able to help." The guard looked doubtful but made a quick call. Minutes later, Tom was escorted into the control center, water dripping from his cap onto the polished floor. Mayor Blake barely glanced at him. "Who's this?" "Says he has experience with hydraulic systems," the guard explained. Chief Engineer Johnson looked up from her diagnostic screens. "What kind of experience exactly?" "Submarine hydraulic systems," Tom replied simply. "Similar principles apply to dam gates." Blake scoffed. "This man can't open the dam gates. This is madness. We need professional dam engineers, not some retired sailor." Tom didn't react to the dismissal. He'd faced far worse under the crushing pressures of the deep ocean. "May I see your schematics?" Johnson hesitated, then nodded, pulling up the technical drawings on her screen. Tom studied them intently, asking precise questions about pressure readings and mechanical tolerances that surprised the engineering team. "The problem isn't in your electrical system," he finally said. "Your gates are vacuum locked." "Vacuum locked?" Johnson frowned. "That's impossible. The system doesn't work that way." "Under normal circumstances, no," Tom agreed. "But with the specific combination of the power surge, the increased water pressure, and the partial hydraulic response, you've created a vacuum seal. It's similar to what happens in submarine emergency hatches." Blake interrupted. "This is ridiculous. We're wasting precious time. Start the full evacuation now." "Sir," Tom continued, Undeterred, evacuating is wise, but you have another option. I can manually release the vacuum pressure and free the gates. And how exactly would you do that? Blake demanded. I'll need to access the maintenance tunnels below the dam and use the manual override valves in a specific sequence. It's not in your standard procedures because this situation wasn't anticipated in the design. Johnson looked skeptical but intrigued. Those tunnels will be partially flooded already. I'm comfortable in flooded compartments, Tom said with a slight smile. Blake threw up his hands. This is insane. You're going to get yourself killed, old man. Tom looked directly at the mayor, his eyes reflecting decades of command decisions made under pressure. Perhaps. But if we don't try, how many homes will be destroyed? How many livelihoods lost? A heavy silence fell over the room. Even Blake seemed to reconsider. Johnson broke the tension. I'll go with him. No, Tom said firmly. I work alone. Just give me a radio and a flashlight. 20 minutes later, Tom was being lowered into a maintenance shaft. Cold water already reached his knees. The radio at his belt crackled with Johnson's voice providing guidance, though he hardly needed it. He'd memorized the schematics instantly. Another skill honed during decades of submarine service, where knowing every valve, pipe, and circuit could mean life or death. As he waded deeper into the tunnel, the water rose to his chest. Any normal person might have panicked, but Tom had spent a lifetime in tight, dark spaces with the ocean pressing in from all sides. This was practically comfortable by comparison. Mr. Wilson, water levels are rising faster than predicted. Johnson's voice warned through the radio. You have maybe 30 minutes before that tunnel completely floods. Understood, Tom replied calmly. He reached the first junction and turned left, moving with surprising agility for his age. Years of navigating submarine corridors in crisis situations had taught him efficiency of movement. Back in the control center, tension mounted. Blake paced nervously while Johnson monitored the water levels. This is on you if he drowns down there, Blake muttered. Johnson didn't look up from her screens. He knows what he's doing. He's a senile old man playing hero. Maybe, Johnson replied. But did you see how he read those schematics? No ordinary sailor could do that. In the tunnels, Tom reached the main hydraulic control junction. The water now reached his shoulders, and the powerful current tried to push him off balance. He anchored himself against a pipe and began the delicate process of manually cycling the relief valves in the precise sequence needed to break the vacuum seal. Each valve required significant physical strength to turn, strength that would challenge even a younger man. Tom's muscles burned with the effort, but he methodically worked through the sequence, drawing on reserves of determination built during countless submarine emergencies. After turning the final valve, he waited, listening. At first, nothing happened. Then he felt it, a subtle change in pressure, a shift in the water's movement around him. Control, this is Wilson. Check your gate sensors. Johnson's voice came back immediately, excitement breaking through her professional tone. Mr. Wilson, we're getting movement. Gate 1 is shifting. Gate 2, they're responding. Tom allowed himself a small smile as he began making his way back through the rapidly flooding tunnel. The gates were opening, but he still needed to get out before the tunnels completely flooded. Halfway back, disaster struck. A surge of water knocked him off his feet, sending him underwater. His radio short-circuited. For a moment, panic flashed across his mind, but then decades of training took over. He oriented himself, found the tunnel wall, and pulled himself forward, one handhold at a time. In the control center, Johnson lost contact. Mr. Wilson? Mr. Wilson, come in. Only static answered. He's gone, Blake said quietly. Johnson shook her head. The gates are still opening. Water levels at the reservoir are stabilizing. For 45 agonizing minutes, they waited. The emergency teams reported that the dam was holding, the town would be spared the worst of the flooding. But of Tom Wilson, there was no sign. Then, as hope began to fade, a security guard burst into the control room. He's here. He came out through the south emergency exit. Tom Wilson sat in a chair in the medical area, a blanket around his shoulders, looking remarkably composed for a man who had nearly drowned. When Mayor Blake and Chief Engineer Johnson rushed in, he simply nodded in greeting. The gates? He asked. Fully operational, Johnson confirmed. You were right about the vacuum lock. How did you know? Experienced something similar on a deep-sea mission in '83, Tom said simply. Different context, same physics. Blake shook his head in amazement. Mr. Wilson, I owe you an apology, and this town owes you its gratitude. Tom waved away the praise. Just doing what needed to be done. It might have ended there, another anonymous act of heroism, except for what happened next. A young lieutenant in naval uniform entered the room, soaking wet from the rain. He stopped abruptly when he saw Tom, then snapped to attention and saluted. Captain Wilson, sir, I didn't expect to find you here. Blake looked confused. Captain? The lieutenant looked equally confused. Yes, sir. Captain Thomas Wilson, former commander of the USS Nebraska. One of the most decorated submarine captains in Navy history. He turned to Tom. Sir, I studied your tactical maneuvers at Annapolis. Your crisis management protocols are still taught there. A stunned silence fell over the room. Mayor Blake's jaw literally dropped. You were a submarine captain. Nuclear submarines? Tom sighed, his cover blown. A lifetime ago. But why didn't you say anything? Johnson asked. When the mayor dismissed you, would it have changed the situation? Tom asked simply. The gates needed opening. My rank wasn't relevant to the problem. News of Tom's identity and his heroism spread through Riverdale like wildfire. By evening, as the rain finally began to subside, the story had transformed. The crazy old man was now revealed as Captain Thomas Wilson, USN, holder of the Navy Cross and former commander of one of America's most advanced nuclear submarines. 3 days later, at an emergency town council meeting, Mayor Blake stood before a packed room. The storm had passed, leaving minimal damage thanks to the functioning dam. Tom sat in the back, uncomfortable with the attention but persuaded to attend by a delegation of townspeople who had shown up at his cabin. Riverdale has always been a town that overlooked its greatest resource. Its people, Blake began. 3 days ago, I dismissed a man based on his age and appearance. I couldn't have been more wrong. He gestured for Tom to join him at the podium. Reluctantly, Tom made his way forward. Captain Wilson could have told us who he was. He could have pulled rank or credentials, but he didn't, because that's not who he is. Instead, he simply offered his help, faced dismissal with dignity, and then risked his life to save our town. Blake turned to face Tom directly. On behalf of Riverdale, I extend our deepest gratitude, and I've learned a lesson I won't forget. Never judge someone's capabilities by their age or appearance. Tom accepted the town's official commendation with characteristic humility. When offered the microphone, he said only, "In my experience, both under the sea and here on land, it's not about who gets credit, it's about completing the mission." Today, Riverdale stands, mission accomplished. As applause filled the room, Johnson approached Tom with a proposal. The town needs a new emergency management director. Someone who understands crisis response, hydraulic systems, and can keep cool under pressure. Would you consider it? Tom looked surprised. At my age? Johnson smiled. I think we've established that age is just a number, Captain. For the first time in years, Tom Wilson felt a sense of purpose beyond his quiet riverside existence. He looked around at the community he'd helped save, not as a decorated naval officer, but simply as a man willing to help when needed. I'll consider it, he said finally, a new chapter beginning where he least expected it. The next morning, Mayor Blake found a framed Navy photograph on his desk, a younger Tom Wilson standing proudly on the deck of the USS Nebraska, surrounded by his crew. Attached was a simple note, "Never underestimate the quiet ones. They often have the most to offer." Blake placed the photo prominently on his office wall, a daily reminder that heroes don't always look the part, and that wisdom and courage don't diminish with age, they simply wait for the moment when they're needed most. In the years that followed, Riverdale became known for its innovative emergency management program, one that specifically recruited retired professionals and valued experience over appearances. And it all began with a crazy old man who just happened to know how to save a town from disaster. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story created especially for you.